Welcome to Insider Insights, the podcast where we invite our authors from Insider Imprints to talk about their recent publication. I'm Natalie. I'm one of the editors for Insider Imprints, the life science student journal at the University of Liverpool. Today, I'm joined by a special guest, John Waters, who just 2 weeks ago won the Times Higher Education Award for Outstanding Technician of the Year. So it's basically the Oscars for higher education awards. So thanks for joining me today, John.
You're welcome.
So what does it feel like to be nominated, and has it sunk in yet that you've won?
I think it's slowly starting to sink in now. The evening of the awards, it was a very surreal experience. We were sitting there waiting for your name, and then to hear your name, everything else just seems to just go in slow motion. So I think everything after my name, I didn't hear, and I didn't know what went on. So it was like, did they really say that? So it was really, it was a surreal experience. So to actually be nominated, it was back in July that the nomination took place, so it was quite a while ago. So I did actually know I'd been nominated back in July, but they said there was a shortlist which was going to be produced in, I think it was late September, a shortlist of, I think they said 8. But with the COVID situation, I didn't think that they were going to produce a shortlist. I think they would, because it was virtual ceremony, they were just going to announce it on the evening. So to actually get an email to say I've been shortlisted, I was absolutely gobsmacked, because I did know there was a lot of high class applications for this award. So just to be shortlisted was amazing, and I would have been happy just to have got to the shortlist. It was amazing, but to actually win it's absolutely amazing to win, but it's the highlight of my career to date by far.
Well, congratulations again.
Thanks.
Before we start though, talking about why you won the award, why don't you just tell our listeners what it means to be an animal technician here at Liverpool?
Well, for people who don't know what animal technicians are, we are a professional body of people who look after animals in academia, maybe in vet research, pharmaceutical companies. So our jobs mainly are welfare and looking after the day-to-day needs of their animals. So it can be anything from their physiological needs, of feeding, watering, cleaning, as well as their psychological needs, environmental enrichment, to try and get the natural behavior out of the animals in, you can say, in the laboratory setting. So it is quite complex. So, we do cover a lot of areas. There's technicians in totally, as I say, they can be vet research, they can be pharmaceutical companies, they can be Ministry of Defence. There is a lot of different technicians, all with different specialties. At Leahurst, we mainly deal with behaviour and animal welfare. And obviously, I work for a world-renowned group who produces quality research in behaviour, and obviously linked into my award, animal welfare, improving animal welfare. So it can be a variety of different roles.
And how did you become a technician, and how did you get into it?
Well, way back, I think 1990. I was at sixth form college doing my A levels, and I got sick, so I missed a large portion of year 1. So they asked me would I repeat year 1, and I didn't really want to repeat the year again. I'd done half of it. So I actually wrote to the Institute of Animal Technology to ask about information regarding careers as an animal technician in the Northwest. And they wrote back with contact details for the university. So I got in touch with the manager of the facility in main campus, and he invited me along for a visit. So I went along on a day and had a visit and spent the day with him. And then he said that they had a position available. Would I be prepared to, or would I like to apply for it? Which I did. And luckily I got the job. So that was way back. So I started as a trainee, just obviously learning all the basics of animal husbandry. That was in the medical school, so there was a variety of research work going on. And I was lucky enough to be involved in different types of research. So, and then I stayed there for about 5 years and moved to the School of Tropical Medicine, which I got involved in parasitology work and tropical medicine disease. And I stayed there for 5 years and then came to Leahurst, and I've been here 19 and a half years. So it was a good decision to go for, and you know, I've been really happy as an animal technician for all those years.
That's great. So why don't you tell us now more about the work you did that led you to be nominated for your award?
Well, I'll have to say I've been really, really lucky in the work I've been able to get involved with, because Professor Hurst, the work she did was looking at how to improve laboratory animal welfare. Now, as an animal technician, I think it's your main priority is to improve the welfare of the animals you look after. So when Jane came along with the idea of looking into how picking the laboratory animals up by the tail influenced their behavior and would I like to get involved, I was only too willing, because it really sort of ticked the boxes for me, you know, and I've always wanted to make a difference as an animal technician, and I was given the opportunity to do that. So she produced the main work, I think it was in 2010, where she won the NC3R's prize for the best welfare work of the year. So then she then look to see how facilities and establishments would be able to make most use of the research. So, because the work would only make a difference if people would take this on. You know, it was an improvement, but it was getting people to change, which human nature, people don't really want to change. So it was a challenge. So I think I got involved from the point of an animal technician, because I realized what other animal technicians would go through, you know, having to change, because before us changing here, I picked animals up for 20 years by the tail, and I knew the difficulties just in that in itself, to change from one thing to another. I suppose it's very much like writing with your right hand for so long and then asking someone to write with their left. You know, it really is gonna be a challenge. So my role was to go out and help technicians in the transfer over from not picking up by those. So I just gave them the benefits of the experiences I had within our facility, and hopefully try and help them not make the same mistakes that I made, because we may be a smallish unit here, but in larger units, time is obviously of the essence, and they can't afford to do something that's going to increase their workload. You know, and nobody would. You know, it's human nature. No one wants to do anything that's going to create more time. So we looked into the time scales, and we decided that it wasn't that much of an issue only when you were trained properly. So my role was to obviously try and educate technicians in the benefits of not picking mice up by the tail anymore. So that was the main, and then it sort of snowballed slightly then, and we produced some tutorials, posters, we did workshops, and I was lucky enough to go obviously to Sweden and America to promote the non-tail handling, which was great, because going to America, you hear a lot of stories how far behind in terms of animal welfare America is, but that wasn't the case at all. I was really surprised on how much they wanted to learn, you know, and how much they had improved their animal welfare. So they were interested in changing over as well. So it was really good that it was going outside the UK as well. So and to just to be a technician and to be able to make that sort of difference on a global scale, and you know, it was, I don't think you could ask for anything more.
Yeah, so in general, you find people are quite receptive to this new idea.
Not at
No.
first, no, definitely not at first. I think when we started in 2012, we did a survey, and I think it was roughly about 5% of facilities were taking it on, and it took nearly, I would say, 9 years to change to where we are now, which is I think near 70%. So you can see that people just in general don't like change,
Yeah.
you know, and I think one of the biggest difficulties we had was not giving off the impression you were telling people you've been doing it wrong, because that's how people sort of took it to begin with. And we were saying, like everything else, it's just an improvement. you haven't been doing it wrong because the information wasn't available before now. So just trying to get people, I think, go and actually visiting facilities and seeing how they were handling and showing them how we handle. I think that was sort of the light bulb moments where they could see that it was an easy method to do, and if you persevere, then you can become, it's like everything else, you can become really quick. And I think then it just then word of mouth, people were saying, well, we're doing it and it's not that hard, so then they were trying it, and luckily we've got to a sort of a 70% level now.
Very good. Now, normally in normal times, you would have got to go to London and it would have been like a black tie event.
Yeah.
Was a small part of you disappointed that it was?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, without a doubt, because I'd looked on the previous year and because it was on their website, all the photographs from the night. And yeah, it was a bit of a disappointment. But, to have, I was with the family and obviously yourself and the rest of the group, to have them there was great. I should imagine on the normal night you wouldn't have had that anyway. So to have the people that are closest to the work as well, that was really nice, which wouldn't have happened. But I suppose the Grosvenor Hotel, that was a bit of a it was a bit of a law to get you to go to the awards. But yeah, I was happy. It was nice to be at home and obviously be able to have some champagne at home. and not pay the Grosvenor prices.
Yes, no, it was definitely better for the rest of us, like us in our team, because we were able to watch you get it. Though I think for myself, there must have been a delay because I saw everybody else celebrating before I heard heard them announce your name. But it was so great.
Yeah, when you see my IT skills are not the best, so it was good. But yeah, because I sort of had interaction sort of on the chat as well with the other technicians who were nominated as well. And I think as a group, we corresponded via Twitter and stuff like that. And I think no matter who won, the other people would have been really, really pleased because I know I'm an animal technician, but the actual category was for all technicians across all disciplines. So if you go and have a look at the short list of people and the different work they're doing and the difference they are making, it sort of brings home to you winning it how sort of not good, but how well received the work that we were doing has been, because it is, or it can be, an area where people can have different views on, obviously, and animal technicians and obviously animals within biomedical and scientific research. So to be rewarded in a place that covers more than just animal technicians is really, really good for me, but also for the area of animal welfare as well. It's being recognised beyond our own profession, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Now, just going back to general being an animal technician, what would you think is the best thing about your job?
It's got to be the animals. It always is. I think I grew up in a time where most of my time was spent outside, so a lot of it was being nature and just watching birds and obviously general animals itself. So I had the love of animals. So I think when people have asked me in the past about animal technicians and they say, oh, I love animals, you do get the response, how sort of difficult it can be. But I think you can only be an animal technician if you love animals, because you devote all your work and time to looking after animals. And if you don't have that rapport with the animals, I should imagine it can be a very difficult job. Mm-hmm. So it has to be obviously the animals, but also being able to get involved in research. There's such a vast area within this university of research that's going on, and I think if you ask questions and you show willing to get involved, you can get involved in the research, which I've been lucky enough to do. So I think, another plus side is being able to be where I am now and be recognised beyond the university for my contributions. So I think without being an animal technician, I couldn't have done that. I don't think. But yeah, definitely the animals. And with the work we do here at Leahurst, sometimes we get species of animals where they're not your common lab species. So because we use a lot of wild species in our behavioural work. We had edible dormice, which we had to try and learn how to look after in a lab situation. But the most important thing was to be able for them to exhibit their natural behaviour as well, and not having the internet to look up or whatever. We have to learn as we go. And I think when you get to a point where you think, well, we're looking after these animals the best we possibly can. Their welfare is superb. There's no issues with them at all. You've got to a place by yourself. You haven't. No one's come in and told you anything. We are used as a resource as well by establishments when they want to use sort of those same sort of species in behavioural work as well. So it's nice that we can get involved in educating other facilities as well.
Yeah, they know that you know what you're doing.
Sometimes. Yeah.
So then what's the hardest part of being an animal technician?
I think not just animal technician. I think any area where you use animals, I think the hardest part is, I suppose, the euthanasia of animals. No matter what you do, whether you're in the zoo situation or you're a veterinary nurse, I think having to euthanize animals is the hardest part. No one wants to do that. But I think sometimes, and I think people who even keep pets realize that you get to a point where if you don't euthanize animals, then you're going to lead to obviously increased stress and possibly pain. And I think no person who loves animals wants to see that. So I think that is a difficult part. It's a necessity of the job, and I think you have to know that you're doing it because of the welfare of the animals. And I think that's our job, is to look after the welfare, and it does become part of it. Or especially if an animal's sick, you don't want to leave it to get to a point, and obviously you have to intervene at times. And I think that comes across any platform where you work with animals. It's a tough. I think there's a lot of work now looking into the effects of that, and different for even for vets themselves, who have to euthanize animals. There's very little work in the past been done in the UK on the effects of obviously euthanizing animals on people. But I think that is now changing, and I think the Americans have led the way. They do call it the cost of caring. So it is, for me, it's a benefit. The IAT as well, which is the Institute of Animal Technology, who is our professional body, they are now looking into it and how to support people through the process if it does become an emotional, I wouldn't say burden, but if the emotional effects get too much, there is coping mechanisms and there is support there. So I think, because we bring animals into the facility and we learn about them, they become part of our facility. And when we do have to euthanize, and I think that's tough. That's the hardest part.
Definitely. And if there's any students thinking of a career as becoming an animal technician, do you have any advice you'd like to give them?
I think the best advice I could give to anybody as an animal technician, but I suppose it's any working with animals anywhere, the zoo or in the vets. I think it's to show a passion that you enjoy what you're doing and the areas you're working in, and to ask lots of questions. That's what I did. Probably researchers in the past have been fed up of me asking questions, but it interested me and I really wanted to learn. And I think if you can show an interest, but you can also be helpful, I think that most researchers will get you involved. And I think research fascinated me, the way we get to understand and learn what we've learned over the years. And to get involved in that has been fantastic. So it's definitely, show a passion, but ask lots of questions. And I think people enjoy telling people about their work, educating people, because today's sort of researchers, you've got to look to tomorrow as well. And the people coming through, if you can educate them and nurture them along, I think it's a platform for a better future.
Yeah, I think that's great advice for anyone starting a new job.
Yeah, and I think, some people are a bit shy and, they don't feel like they can. And that was me when I first started. I was only 17 when I first started, and I wish I would have got to that stage a lot quicker than what I did. You know, I was probably so shy I wouldn't even do a presentation, and I think you learn, and when you look back, you think, I wish I would have done it earlier,
Yeah.
because you can learn so much, and I think it helps with your career progression as well, and it certainly has me, just being willing to get involved.
Yeah, so you think the person you were when you started would be quite surprised to know that you went up to America by yourself and presenting to.
That's it,
Yeah.
and I think if you would have asked maybe before I'd even got started in the handling work, you know, I went through university avoiding the modules I had presentations in, because I just didn't like being up in front of people, and you get that feeling where your mouth sort of dries up, you can't speak, and that was me, and I thought, I don't want to put myself in that position, but the handling work enabled me just to, well, I was sort of thrust into it, and just said, and I found I enjoyed it. So I learned a huge lesson doing the animal from a personal level as well, that you can do it, and it's given me the springboard to be able to it. And obviously I'm thankful to Jane and the university for giving me that opportunity to be able to do and present something that I was really passionate about. Yeah, and I think that's what's helped. It's being passionate about what you do and getting that across to other people.
Yeah, and I think that's great for listeners
Yeah,
to know that sometimes you just need to, you might be better at something than you think, you just have to
that's
give
it.
it a go first.
It's a sink or swim
Yeah.
scenario, and you think, because I think just a little funny story. The first time we took it out, and I think it was my very first presentation ever at the IAT conference. It was a workshop, and I was just about to start, and the software we were using for the survey wouldn't work. So I'm up there, I prepared this presentation, and I couldn't do it. So then I just had to sort of go off bat and just
Wing
wing it and just
it.
wing it. And I think that settled me down a lot, because it was like, I can't just stand here and let the stage swallow me up. So we just sort of winged it. And then they got this software working, and it was just successful. And I think from that point, I thought, well, if I can cope in a situation where it's gone really, really wrong, I can cope in the situations where it's really goes right. So yeah, I definitely say just get involved and believe in yourself as well. Believe that you can do it.
That's great. And I know your passions for animals goes beyond work as well, and that you're got a passion for pigeons.
Yeah, pigeon
Could you tell me
racing.
more about
I
that?
think when people mention pigeon racing, they think of really old people with flat caps and greyhounds doing it. Well, and I think that is the image up until maybe say 5-6 years ago that we probably had. We've done a huge amount of work to change the profile. So pigeon racing is basically what it is. You take pigeons various miles away, and you use their homing instinct to race back. So it's worked out on the velocity. So if you send your pigeons 10 miles and I'm 10 miles further away, so it's worked out to how far and how fast they fly per minute. So it's become popular because I think China now have got behind pigeon racing, and I think they've got something ridiculous like 500,000 pigeon fanciers now in China, and the world record for a racing pigeon has just been like 1.3 million pounds for a racing pigeon. So you can see how much the image is changing.
It's not getting competitive now. Then.
Yeah, but it goes back to when I said earlier, when I was younger, we didn't have sort of video games and technology like now. So I was always outside with the pigeons, or we had canaries as well. So it just, I suppose it's something that gets passed down through generations, and I really enjoy it, but it's hard to get across to people how you can enjoy it. It's a real strange thing, but for me, to send a pigeon to Barcelona and sit in your back garden and wait for it to come home, it's like, how can it fly that far and come back to exactly the same spot? I'm mesmerized by it, and I think that's why it fascinates me so much, because again, it's science and no one knows how they find their way home. But just to think they come back to that one spot, and it's quite. I think it's magnetic. There's something to do with magnetics because I at home I moved my garden around, so I moved the sheds around. So even though the shed was still in the same garden, the pigeons would land in the spot where the shed was.
Right, yeah.
So it's like they home into something. So, but now the money situation is probably what's making it popular again now. But
Yeah.
we've got now a developmental officer at the Royal Pigeon Racing Association who his job is to go into schools, and I think there's about 12 schools who've got a pigeon loft now
Very good.
because it can educate them in obviously maths, science, and geography. So I think they're using it, and also there's a social side of it as well. They found that the sort of in deprived areas, where maybe the children of that age don't have as much as what other children have. It's given them a focus, and it's given them something basically to do as well, and they really enjoy it. And it's a strange sport because once you've done it, it sort of stays with you. It's really hard to say what it is, but it stays with you, and you never get rid of that feeling. So and I'm always out when I'm out, always looking in the sky, and obviously Joanne, my wife, will say, "I know what you do, I know what you do." It's one of those strange things, but yeah, pigeons is a big part of my life, as with most animals, dogs as well. And I think that's what makes most technicians is just their love of animals.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you very much for talking to me today.
No, it's been a pleasure, and I hope that it does give people an insight into obviously our roles and what we do. But if anyone would like any more information on the animal technician role, if they visit www.iat.org.uk, there was job descriptions and obviously how you can get involved in the education, and there's how much you can likely to earn as an animal technician and the different areas. So there's lots of information on that website if anyone's interested.
That's good. Thank you very much. Yeah, and that now brings us to the end of today's podcast. So thanks again to John for talking to me today, and congratulations
Thank you. You're welcome.
on your win. If you'd like to find out more about our Insider Insights journal and how to get involved, please visit www.insiderimprint.com, or you can get in contact with us via Facebook, Twitter, or just send us an email. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you. Bye.